like, who has an 11,000 mile Aviator? Like, there's nobody preserves those cars. So I have a penchant for Aviators, and not just the ones that I wear on my face to hide my ugly mug, but it probably started when my grandmother bought one when I was younger. Yeah, no, they're not that old, but anyway, I helped my grandmother buy a SUV back in 2003-ish and went shopping for her, which was a lot of fun because I had just graduated high school and got to go out and pretend to be a baller at these car dealerships and test drive Cadillac Escalades and all sorts of luxury cars. And that was just fun for me because being a car guy, going car shopping is a great experience. So anyway, she ended up with an Aviator, partly at my recommendation. And fast forward about 7 or 8 years, and I was looking for an SUV. And I wanted one that was good in the winter, got semi-reasonable gas mileage, but most importantly had good towing capacity because I needed something that could tow my race car and aluminum trailer to the track. So I needed about a 6,000 or 7,000 pound towing capacity. So that eliminated a lot of stuff like BMW X5s and other performance-oriented SUVs. But I didn't want a full-on truck. I didn't want a Ford Excursion or something huge like that. So I was searching in this impossible category of mid-size SUVs with at least 6,000 pounds towing capacity. I did what I typically do when I am looking for a car is I make a nerdy spreadsheet and compare all the statistics on all the vehicles and narrow it down that way. And I pretty much came down to one possibility, and that was the Lincoln Aviator. And granted, I had a little connection with it, nostalgia factor that certainly played into the decision, but they, by all appearances, seemed to be the right fit. Really good looking truck, luxurious, I guess, and they had I think it was a 7,200 pound towing capacity, which was ridiculous for a small SUV by today's standards. So I went on the hunt for one, and I borrow a philosophy from a good car guy on the Porsche forums who essentially says that he wants to buy the most virgin car possible, and then he wants to ruin it. He doesn't want to buy a car that somebody else ruined. There's a lot of people that buy garage queens to perpetuate that and keep them as garage queens. I'm the guy who buys the most perfect car possible and then just drives the absolute piss out of it. But I don't want to buy one that somebody else has ruined. I want to be the guy that ruins the car. So I went on the hunt for the nicest Aviator I could find. This is about 2011, so I was looking for, 6-7-year-old car, the nicest one I could find. And a friend of mine sent me a listing locally, and the car had 11,000 miles on it. It was a 2004 in pearl white. It had one just like terrible grainy picture and 5 words of description. It was the worst listing ever. It kind of seemed like a scam. And I was like, all right, that's cool. But I think it was 17 grand, which was way overpriced for an Aviator at that time. They were $10,000, $12,000 trucks. But again, back to my philosophy of wanting to buy the nicest one possible. I was like, well, this is probably the nicest one out there. It was in Bracknell, Ohio, which is an interesting town in the Cleveland suburbs because it's a very right side of the track, wrong side of the track type of locale. On the north side of the highway is all $1 million lake houses, and on the south side of the highway is where you don't want to go at night. And I called the number and got a very foreign sounding person. I couldn't really tell the accent, but honestly to me it sounded Middle Eastern. The guy was just a little bit dodgy and wouldn't let me come out after 4 p.m. because he was concerned, about it being dark or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm getting this real shady vibe, but then I'm thinking, okay, well, if he's shady, then why is he not wanting me to come out at night? Usually it's the other way around. I'd be the one that didn't want to go out at night or something. So it was just super weird because couldn't understand the guy on the phone. Terrible picture, terrible description. And like, who has an 11,000 mile Aviator? Like, that's, nobody preserves those cars. And I'm like, I got to go check this out. So me and my buddy John headed out there at 3:30 to go check this car out. And all the way there, I'm going, all right, which side of the tracks is this experience going to be on? And so we get out there and we pull in to the right side of the tracks, and this beautiful, meticulously maintained house. And the lawn was perfect. Everything was edged and manicured, and we pull into the back of the house. He's got this massive detached garage, and there's this elderly black guy out in his yard just trimming bushes and taking care of his garden. I was like, okay, this is definitely not what I expected. So he opens up his garage, and inside his garage, he's got the Aviator, a perfect white Jaguar XK8, and like two other just beautiful white cars, all white cars. I think one of them was a Porsche. I don't remember what the other ones were, but he had four just beautiful cars in there. And he said, well, the Aviator is my wife's car. She never drives it. It's never been driven in the winter, but last month she took it down to Atlanta and back. And that was the most miles she's put on it. So that was 10% of the miles that she put on in one trip. And like, I'm just trying to get a read on this guy, because nothing is what you would have expected. It's just a character that's very tough to figure out. But apparently he just loves white cars and preserve them perfectly. So he said, well, what do you drive if you never drive these cars? And he points over, and he's got this absolutely beat ass Ford Focus that is filled with McDonald's wrappers and looks like a hoarder lived in it, and is such a juxtaposition to this quiet, mild-mannered, soft-spoken, meticulous person with this beautiful collection of white cars and perfectly manicured gardens. And then he's got this terrible black Ford Focus that he probably has 200,000 miles on. Anyway, so we're like, okay, this is awesome, but weird on so many levels. So took it for a drive. It felt like a new truck, and it had obviously never been driven in winter. One, because the control arms and the aluminum pieces on the underside were still shiny. The heated seats had probably never been used, because it took the entire test drive for them even to get hot. It took like 20 minutes for the heated seats to get warm. So we struck a deal, met at the bank, and gave him a cashier's check and bought the truck, because how could I not buy one that perfect? But there's this phenomenon with people when they sell cars. They want to sell it to the right buyer, which I've never understood, because I really don't care, right? Cash is cash. You do whatever you want with the car after you buy it. It's your car. When he was handing over the keys, he started asking me a couple questions. He's like, well, you're not going to drive this in the winter, are you? And I was like, yep. I already got snow tires for it. And I'm going to tow my trailer and like do all this stuff. Sorry, no promises. I thought he was just going to like renege on the deal, because I couldn't promise him that I was going to take as good care of it as he had. But he let me have it anyway. And as he handed over the keys, he said, take good care of Betsy. Now, I'm a firm believer that vehicle names are earned, not bequeathed, right? You don't name a car like you name a boat. There has to be a story behind it. So of course, Betsy was the name that had to follow that truck. So she was forever Betsy. And it was an awesome truck. I had so much fun in it. It was actually, my parents live on a dirt road, and there was a really good snowstorm one Christmas when I visited them. So I was essentially like rallying down it with my mother in the Aviator on this dirt road covered in snow at 60 miles an hour. And my dad is not a fan of speed at all, but my mom is a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. So we were having fun with that. And it ended up being an awesome truck. It towed well beyond its weight. Got terrible gas mileage when it was towing, but who cares? And surprisingly, people thought it was a new truck. It finally met its demise, and I didn't do my homework on the forums. This is totally on me. But apparently that engine has an issue with the number one cylinder overheating. And it will present itself in a couple of ways. Number one, the valve guides will go, which you can upgrade to bronze valve guides. Or number two, it'll actually like get too hot in the cylinder, because I guess there's like a coolant hose bend going into the number one cylinder that constrains the flow, and so that cylinder gets too hot. I was not aware of that issue. There's a preventive fix, but because I didn't know about it, didn't happen. And so at about 60,000 miles, I started getting misfires that we couldn't diagnose. And my mechanic finally did a compression test, and he's like, yeah, you have a dead cylinder. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Then, of course, too late, I did my research, found out that sure enough, this is a problem since they were almost new, even under warranty, but Ford being Ford never issued a recall or anything, so they just stuck everybody with the problem, even though it was a design flaw on their end. I decided to put the truck up for sale because, well, I asked my mechanic if he would fix it. I'm like, how hard can this be? It's a head job, basically. And he said, we don't want to do it because in order to take the heads off of the motor, because of how far back they set it in the frame, you have to lift the body off to do a head job. And I'm like, come on, you got to be kidding. This is a 4.6 liter Cobra motor, essentially. This should be easy, but I guess Ford earned its reputation of fix or repair daily by some of their design foibles, and this was one of them. So rather than undergo a massive labor effort to fix it, I ended up just selling it as a mechanic special, and still got $7,000 out of it, even though it needed a top end. I sold it to a guy who was willing to do the job himself, and ended up buying the next greatest all-around SUV I've ever owned, which was a Volkswagen Touareg TDI. And that one had its own story of drama in the form of Dieselgate, but that's another story for another day.
We'd like to thank the Ticket Clinic for supporting VINwiki this month. When you get a ticket, no matter where it happens, you're risking points on your license, costly fines, insurance premium increases, and risks of suspension or jail time. So it's more important than ever to have great representation. The Ticket Clinic is a nationwide law firm that can help you fight a ticket no matter where you get it. It's easier than ever to start a relationship with them. You'll just take your ticket, snap a picture of it, and text that picture to 305-305. You can also reach them at the link in the description below to thank them for their support of VINwiki and fight your ticket with the Ticket Clinic.